In the fuel market to competition to reduce the strategic importance of oil and the ability of oil price spikes to wreak havoc on our economy, there is a bill called the Open Fuel Standard Act, introduced by Congressman Shimkus and Congressman Engel, that are right here to make a few opening comments. And the focus of the bill is ensuring that new cars enable fuel competition of some sort. After the congressmen say their words, we're going to turn to our panel of speakers, and I'll introduce them after the congressman.
Thank you, Congressman Roscoe Bartlett. As always, a visionary and a leader, and it's most appreciated to have him with us and follow on to it. I appreciate especially my colleagues accommodating me. I've got to run to a meeting and we're way out of protocol. These fellows not only outranked me considerably, but also have taught me most of what I know about this subject. So I'm going to be very brief and hopefully just be a warm-up act for them. Robert has set the stage, of course, as he brilliantly usually does, by putting into context both some of the economics of this and some of the technologies. I'd like to just say a little bit more about some of the strategic conditions and the imperatives that arise from them. It's not an accident that we are seeing prices high. That puppy has grown to the point where the collar is choking. And there's a powerful incentive on the part of those who own it to keep it tight and maybe even to tighten it. The market is, at this point, it seems, sufficiently pinched that if there is any significant disruption in it, prices will go vastly higher, perhaps, certainly higher than they already are, and they're plenty high, as you all know. What are the chances of that? I would argue that they're 100%. 100% that there will be some kind of further constriction in supply in the foreseeable future. I'm not a seer enough, didn't run the CIA, and perhaps Jim can do this better than I, but I can't tell you exactly where that next constriction will come from. Whether it might be the cratering of the Venezuelan oil industry, which Hugo Chavez is rapidly accomplishing. Whether it's a civil war in Nigeria, which seems to be developing. Whether it is something that temporarily at least impedes access through the Strait of Hormuz, or perhaps one of the other choke points through which much of the world's oil flows in that neck of the woods, the southern access to the Red Sea or the Suez Canal. Maybe it's the Saudi infrastructure, which terrorists have tried to blow up in the past. Maybe it's more than one of those, or something else. The point is, it doesn't have to be much of any of them for there to be a crisis. And when you add on top of it that there are certain folks who may have an incentive to create that further constriction, if only to increase the transfer of wealth, which, as Robert said, is astronomical already and debilitating. It also is enabling some of the very threats that we are most concerned about at the moment, not least an Iranian nuclear weapons program. So, given these realities, it seems to me that we have basically only two options. The first option is that we adopt something along the lines of this open fuel standard. We begin in a very concerted way to make ethanol, but most especially methanol, available widely for the benefit of consumers and our economy and our national security. Requiring, as you have been told, minimal changes with respect to new production and fairly modest changes even with respect to existing relatively recent model cars. Robert didn't tell you what it costs in terms of labor for him to make the changes, but it's a couple of $100, I guess, if you go to a dealership. The point is that we have the option today to take this action. I believe that the alternative is going to be that we have to take this action after that crisis eventuates. I really don't think it's in the cards that we're not going to do this. For the very reason that the circumstances we're in right now are simply unsustainable. Even if there is no further diminution of supply, there's increasing demand. And we have people, as I said, and as Robert has said, and as the congressmen have said, who have every interest in keeping it restricted. Even if, as I believe, and I think all of us do, it's useful for us to go drill more, drill now, it's still the case that, as you've seen in Robert's charts, OPEC is going to manipulate their production supply, so it stays pinching. And as it becomes more and more clear, perhaps with the advent of this Iranian nuclear weapon, perhaps as a result of a war that breaks out as a result of it, that this posture of dependency on oil is, in fact, not only a mandate, but an intolerable one. Giving rise, I think, to a popular demand and hopefully legislative steps to respond to it, to have the car manufacturers in this country doing what they've now done for years in Brazil. I don't know about you, but I find it unbelievable, or at least outrageous, that we could be in a position where we have not been told the truth about how widely available these vehicles with the inherent capacity to use these other fuels are. That's the bad news. The good news is, now that we know, hopefully we can do something about this rather quickly. And most importantly, do it before we are confronted with the necessity of doing it after the crisis, which only greatly expands and intensifies the costs and the burdens associated with it. Let me conclude with a point, and I hope Jim will amplify on it. But I really feel, as someone who probably lines up, relatively speaking, on the conservative side of this political spectrum, we cannot further tolerate the notion that out of some sort of pure adherence to an anti-mandate philosophy, we're going to perpetuate this situation that is so dire economically and potentially catastrophic strategically. We have, as a people, adopted in the past, in the automotive sector alone, mandates that give us seat belts, mandates that give us airbags. And there are probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands, maybe more, of us who are alive today because of those mandates. They were resisted, but they were adopted. An even more stunning example of this, I think it must be said, that happened in very recent years. Most of the people who would be asked to make this decision to adopt a mandate were present and accepting of it, by the way. And that was a mandate adopted to ensure that every television set in America will receive digital signals, not analog signals. Now, my personal feeling about this may be heretical, is that saving our economy, saving our country, saving our people, and I really don't think that's too much of an exaggeration, is at least as important as the quality of our imagery on our television sets. So with that, I would urge the adoption of this open fuel standard and encourage all of you who are here today to go forth and multiply for that purpose. Thank you.
our speakers.